Good afternoon. Welcome to the homeschool portion of today's itinerary. My name is Annie Waters.
I'm Diane Harvey.
And we are homeschool educators who are here just to talk about our experience with home education here in Virginia. We're both Virginians, so. All right. Fun fact, can you guys hear me? All right. You can shout out your answer if you think you know. What do Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Taylor Swift, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Abe Lincoln, Justin Timberlake, Venus and Serena Williams, Agatha Christie, C.S. Lewis, and John Adams have in common?
Common ancestor, maybe?
Ancestry?
No, they were all homeschooled.
Oh.
I heard somebody shout it out.
Yeah, there we go.
Somebody got the answer right.
So one of the things I think is important to understand is what is homeschooling, because I know I've been approached by people that wanted to know, like, do we just stay in our house the whole time and sit with the books all day long? And it's really, for some people it is that, probably not all day long, but it's more varied. So I found a great definition of it, that homeschooling is parent-led, home-based education. So it's really something that is nothing new, but rather something old. You know, homeschooling in this country was commonplace until the mid-1800s when we began state schooling. And I found a great quote from a researcher at Johns Hopkins who says, "We're seeing something remarkable here. Homeschooling growth has nearly tripled the pre-pandemic rate and shows no sign of slowing down. This isn't a pandemic hangover, it's a fundamental shift in how American families are thinking about education."
So nearly 3.5 million students in grades K through 12, that's 7% of American kids are homeschooled. And this number has been growing steadily at about a rate of about 5% per year, although during COVID there was a huge surge in homeschooling. Anybody start homeschooling during COVID here?
No, you did not.
Although
started before that.
homeschooling did not return to pre-pandemic levels, but rather has doubled its rate of growth in the last 6 years. So a researcher with Johns Hopkins describes this as a fundamental shift in how American families are thinking about education. Mm-hmm. This is not something new, something old, like Diane said. Before the creation of state compulsory education in the mid-1800s, if you were educated, either you had a tutor or your parents, which is what a lot of the founding fathers did. And we see that a lot. A lot of people homeschool for a variety of reasons, but one of them is the convenience of, if you are someone who is, you know, a killer ice skater or a killer ballerina or a singer, like, you need to get your school done, get up early, get it done, and go on with, you know, this amazing thing you're doing. And we know a lot of people that homeschool for that reason. So.
Yeah, and really, homeschooling is really as diverse as America itself. The reasons that people decide that they want to homeschool is varied. Some people are saying that, you know, they have concerns about the school environment. Other people want to be able to incorporate moral or religious instruction in their child's education. Some people have kids that, you know, they just have learning challenges, or vice versa, they just are very accelerated learners and are able to pick things up quickly, faster than their peers in a classroom. For some, as Annie already said, they have competitive sports or activities that really they want to be able to pursue, and homeschooling gives them that flexibility. And finally, for some, it's just strengthening the bonds of family life. They just love the idea of being able to spend all this extra time with their children and really strengthen those family bonds. One other thing is for families that tend to move a lot. I know I've had a lot of friends that are military, and many of them homeschool their children because they frequently are transferred and they have to pick up and move. And for the kids, that gives them more stability. So really, it for so many people choose it for so many different reasons.
We do know that every state in America provides the option to homeschool, thus recognizing that parents are in charge of their kids' education. And I think it is it's a natural connection as we mark 250 years of America to talk about home education, because home education is about governing yourself. Like you have to be self-disciplined, or you learn it. You have to learn, your kids do too, to get school done. And that's really what the founders were about, was about being virtuous enough people to be self-governed. Like Washington said, when we cease to be good, we'll cease to be great. So I think it's a natural connection between concepts of liberty and self-government. So also, I think it's important to point out that this is self-evident, but I think it's important in the discussion of home education to highlight the fact that nobody loves your child as much as you do. And so nobody is as invested in how your child turns out as you are. And homeschool kids, we'll talk about socialization in a minute, but they are not immune to social pressure. They're going to encounter it everywhere on sports teams and, any kind of youth group or any kind of activity they do, Boy Scouts. But the difference between a homeschool situation is your kid is not immersed in it all day. That's one of the things that we try to do, is get our kids out in the community, out with other kids a lot. But I would say they are marinating in wisdom of older people, and then that's seasoned and peppered with peers, which is really the opposite of sort of a brick and mortar idea. And that is, 40 plus hours a week, your kid is with peers. And I don't know, I think the jury's out on whether that's great. I don't think the jury's out anymore. I think that's, there's some benefits to that, sure, but there's also a lot of benefits to your child being with someone who is wise and loves them and can guide them, and then exposing them as they're mature, to more.
Another question, you mentioned socialization, we will come back to that, but another thing people wonder is, well, how do the kids end up performing academically if they're being homeschooled? And the answer to that is they perform great. On standardized tests, they're scoring about 15 to 25 points higher than traditionally schooled kids. And that, scoring above average has nothing to do with the parents' level of education, no relationship with family income. And then these kids that go on to college, well, first of all, a higher percentage of homeschoolers end up going on to college as compared with traditionally schooled kids. And then once they are in college, they tend to have higher GPAs and higher rates of graduation. And, in my pre-homeschool mom life, I was a college professor, and I can very much understand why that is. It's because when you get to college, you're responsible for your education. You're responsible for scheduling yourself and choosing your classes and really investing yourself in your education. A lot of these homeschooled kids, they've been doing that already. Some of them have actually, already been in college classrooms in high school doing dual enrollment. So, the fact that homeschool kids do so well in college is really not a surprise, because they have that self-discipline and motivation, and it serves them well. And the dual enrollment classes really are helpful because they do give homeschooled kids a chance to participate in college classes while in high school. They are earning college credit, and then bonus for their parents when they get to college, that some of them can graduate a semester or even more early because they've managed to take care of so many of those credits while still in high school. There's so many benefits to homeschooling, and it's not just confined to those. Really, even starting from an early age, in terms of academics, it's just great to be able to tailor curriculum and instruction to the child. There are some kids that really need to be taught a subject a certain way, and you can do that when you homeschool. You can, if one curriculum is not working, you can change to another. And that, being able to tailor that to the child is really, really important. It also gives the kids a chance because, generally on average, if you're in a traditional school, you're going to be there 6 to 8 hours a day. Homeschoolers, on average, it's like 3 to 5. Well, gosh, now you have a whole bunch of extra hours in your day, and you can invest that time in doing a whole host of things, pursuing hobbies, pursuing sports, spending time with family, and that's going to be a big bonus for homeschoolers, honestly. In terms of, recognizing, so if you're working with your child and you can see, wow, my child really struggles with this subject, you can be able to recognize that early and give them some extra help with that so that they don't feel like I'm not good at this, I'm not good at math. One of my kids, math, not a favorite subject. I switched curriculum 3 different times with that particular child until we hit on a math curriculum that it all clicked for that child. That's really, really important. It's also a case where if you have a child that maybe is a whiz at certain subjects and can be moving through the material much faster, they're not being held back and being forced to go at the pace of the rest of the class. You can let them accelerate. And maybe there's other subjects they need to slow down. You have that kind of flexibility with homeschooling. It's also a case where you get exposure to maybe topics and subjects and areas of study that maybe you wouldn't get if you were in a traditional school. With homeschooling, you have that ability to look into areas of interest that may not be part of the standard curriculum.
Yeah, I have 5 kids. My second one always wanted to be a builder. I think that was born of like Richard Scarry and Bob the Builder. But he's really more of a humanities, English, history, philosophy kind of guy. But he just had it stuck in his mind. That's what he wanted to do. And he got to 9th grade and he had Algebra 1 already. And he's like, Mom, I do not remember anything I learned. And I want to go into this field where I have to be good at math. And so he came to me and said, I really want to do a 5th year of high school. And he's like, I think I need a total redo of Algebra 1 so I really own it. I don't just want to pass it with a B. I want to like really master it. So we actually kind of spread out high school over 5 years for him. And he ended up graduating from a top civil engineering degree. He was a senior class lead on his project. And he's still, because he's more of a humanities guy, he's actually a really good communicator and he does very well. A lot of the civil engineers tend to be, more left brain. And so, but that flexibility to let him kind of drag out and add another year, it was so perfect. He was kind of a late bloomer physically, and he was like, his brain was kind of in tandem with that. So yeah, I think the flexibility has been a big blessing to us.
Oh, no, it's huge. You saying that reminded me of one of my sons. He just finished his graduate degree. He's actually working now on the Hill. But he had this passion for government from an early age. And when he got to high school, I was teaching the AP US government class that year for juniors and seniors. And he's, a freshman. He's like, I want to be in your AP class. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Like, it's tough, But no, he wanted to do it. So I said, okay, let's go do it. And he did it. And he did great on the AP exam. And now he's over there. So, having that ability to follow the lead of the kids and their areas of interest and what's going to work best for them, I think it's important.
Oh, it's life-changing. It was life-changing for my kids, yeah. Any more academic thoughts?
I think, some more academic thoughts might come back to me later. Do you want to talk about socialization?
Yeah,
that tends to be a question.
Of course, if you're a homeschool parent, raise your hand if you're a homeschool parent here. Don't you wish you had $1 for every time you're asked, what about socialization? Are your kids going to be weird and lame, right? Yep. I want $1 for that. We'd be going to Italy more often if I had that. So, there's so many answers, I would say, in response to that. I think my kids are like, Mom, we don't get that as much anymore because it's a lot more mainstream to homeschool. But I would say if you picture a greenhouse, your little child is like a little sapling. And yeah, that shelter thing, it's real. They do need to be sheltered from a lot of stuff. And then gradually you take that little plant out of the greenhouse and you can plant it and it can withstand the weather and the hurricane of life. But I don't think you should apologize ever for wanting to shelter your young child, their heart, their mind, their emotions, and then gradually, more and more add, hard experiences, hard people, difficult, mean teachers, difficult personalities. I don't think you kick everybody out and say, throw them to the wolves when they're 6 or else they're going to be wusses. I don't think that's true. In fact, the opposite is true. They grow strength of character from being a little sheltered. So another thing I just wanted to, and I wrote this down, so I didn't want to miss any of the words. Children learn best when they feel deeply loved, emotionally secure, listened to, and respected. If the purpose of homeschool is learning, that is how anyone learns best. And the parent-child relationship becomes the context in which learning flourishes in the early years. So your kids are being socialized. They're being socialized by somebody who loves them. And then that's sprinkled in, for sure, with playtime, with peers. But not the other way around. And I don't think we should apologize for that. And I don't think the social experiment, I know the old commentator Cal Thomas used to say, if you send your kids to Caesar for 12 years, you're going to get Romans. And I think that generally applies to a lot of things in life, but whatever we immerse our kids in, they're going to be like that. So I just think it's good to be intentional about that. All right, homeschooling is parent-led education. It is not me and my kids just sitting at that house saying the pledge and reading books all day. My kids are, I have 5. 3 of them have graduated and gone on to school. 2 still at the house, and we do so many activities. My husband calls it car schooling. He's like, did you even get math done today? Because they're in ballet and rowing and theater, and there's just so many opportunities now for homeschoolers that the challenge is like, we do too much social. We have to rein it in and to learn to do her writing and math so they're not lopsided in that way. But sports is big. There's so many activities now for homeschoolers. I think if you live in a really small town, Diane pointed out, maybe you want to say your thoughts about this.
Yeah, no, it's a case where, homeschooling is happening in all 50 states, and every state has its own homeschool organization that can point you to local homeschool groups in your area. Now, I'm here in Northern Virginia, so it is. Sometimes I feel like it's homeschool central there. There's so many people that are homeschooling. If you live in a more rural area, it can be more of a challenge then sometimes to find homeschool groups and to get the social stuff. But you can't even do it then. You just might have to, instead of just looking within your town, you might have to look within your county, But it is between, it's like homeschool groups sponsoring activities. I'm in a really active one that, it has over 100 families in it. So every year there's a science fair, there's an art show, there's an international day where kids do presentations on countries, there's holiday parties. But besides that, you mentioned theater and dance classes and sports and scouts. There are so many ways that kids can be socialized, but I think Annie pointed this out earlier, there's a difference between being exposed and being immersed, where that's all they have all day long, and it's an important point.
I think, so I have 5 kids. My baby is a little girl, and very confident, very poised. She's darling, of course. I'm not biased at all. But she, we always do swim team in our neighborhood. It's one of our things you just have to do if you're a Waters, and they're all good swimmers because of it. Some of them love it, some of them don't love it. But Annabelle, hit those middle school years, grades maybe 5 through 8, where all of a sudden you're taking temperature of the room, and you're like, am I cool? Am I not cool? And she came home from swim team, not talking about swimming, of which she was perfectly fine, but she was really excited because one of the popular girls had laughed at her joke. And I was like, that just really rubbed me the wrong way. I'm like, why do we anoint this person as the cool person that we're supposed to be chasing their good opinion? I didn't say that, but I was like, oh, well, why is she popular? Is she really kind? Is she really smart? And she's like, my daughter looked at me like I was, speaking a different language. She's like, Mom, she's cool. She's popular. and my kid had learned this in a day at swim team for 2 hours, read the room, and also determined that she was not cool. She's like, Mom, she's blonde. And I was like, well, you're blonde. And she's like, no, but she's pretty. I was like, well, you're pretty. And she's like, Mom, she's just popular. You just don't get it. She has a Stanley. This is before everybody had a Stanley. But I was like, and I thought, I'm so glad. I was like, baby, we don't need to chase the good opinion of someone just because someone else has decided that they are worthy of, and I thought, I'm really glad that we do some of those activities, but her whole world is not identifying herself in relation to if someone else thinks that she's cool and popular. I feel like it's a really toxic way to grow up, and you label yourself. So that particular kid has chosen to homeschool longer than I have one daughter that wanted to go to a Christian classical school in 11th and 12th, so she's there. But the baby is like, no, I'm still in my greenhouse, Mom. I kind of like being here. So, yeah.
That's a nice place to be. when I look back over our years of homeschooling, one of the things I really appreciated is that we could weave our homeschooling in with our bigger life. So if we are going on vacation to New England, then guess what we're going to be studying in history that year? We're going to study American Revolution, and we're going to read, Mark Twain so that we can stop at his house in Connecticut as we're driving through. And that ability to blend in education with the family life is wonderful. And when my big kids, so I have 4 kids, 2 of them have graduated college, they are flourishing in their careers. One is a rising senior in college, and then I have one that's a rising 9th grader. But when my big kids were little kids, it was great because we could all study history, the same historical time period. The bigger kids were obviously reading more advanced books and going more in depth, but the little kids could study that same time period in history, and then we would go on field trips together, and it was something everybody was studying and they could all relate to. And I really love that ability to weave in homeschooling with family life.
Yeah, we had a cousin get married in Chicago, so I went to Costco and got this huge flat cardboard box, and we used half and half bottles and I don't know, a bunch of cylinders or whatever, and we built a skyline of Chicago, and my kids were, I don't know, like 9, 6, and 3 or something at that point, but they learned so much. We got books about Chicago. We did a total unit study on the architecture of Chicago. Anyway, it was really fun, and when the kids got so attached, they were crying when we left Chicago. We drove out back to our house. They were like, "Bye, Chicago, we love you," because we had spent like a month building it and reading books about it. So there's a lot of delight-driven learning you can do, especially when kids are little. Not maybe you have to kind of stick to the grind a little when they're older, but it was really special to get to do just stuff like that. You chase what they love.
Yeah, you do. And I'm sorry, but just from a practical point of view, it was nice to not have to get up at the crack of dawn to get kids ready to go on the bus. I can still see my kids because we lived along the street where the bus stop was really right there in the corner. They could see it from the breakfast room window, and they would see the kids getting picked up. And they're just coming down in their jammies to get ready to eat their cereal, and they're like, wow, like they've already been out there. And so definitely being able to have homeschooling sort of match like the family schedule, the family vibe has definitely been nice over the years.
I would say too, you can travel in off season. Now that I have one kid who's in school, it is we have to pay the same rates as everybody else to rent a house at the beach or whatever. It's really nice to be able to travel in off season and do adventures with your kids.
Yeah, you can save a ton of money that way also, right? Yeah, most definitely.
And I did write this down too. I wanted to highlight the facts that we teach our kids are important, but homeschooling also asks, I think in a way that no other method of education can, what kind of person, soul, citizen, family member, friend, what kind of eternal soul am I producing here? And education should form the whole person. We're not just heads on a stick, and neither are our children. And so I think that that's a benefit too of home education for us, is thinking about, okay, what does this kid need right now? What is the most important thing? And a parent can pivot in a way that a classroom educator can't.
That's absolutely true. The other thing that I really appreciated about homeschooling is the kids and growing up and learning, they loved learning for the sake of learning.
Yeah.
And it was definitely something that struck a point when, so like I said, I used to teach in academia, I used to teach college, and then once my oldest daughter got to high school, I started to teach at a local homeschool high school co-op. And the one thing that I noticed that when I was still teaching college, kids would I'd be talking about something and I'm super interested and excited about it, and the kid would raise their hand and say, is this going to be on the test? And if I said no, all the pens would go down and you could just see everybody just zoned out. They were no longer interested. I don't get that question in my homeschool high school classrooms. I don't have kids asking me, is this going to be on the test? they are still scrabbling down in their notes because they are interested in learning.
Yeah, I think there can be a utilitarian view of education anywhere, right? But homeschooling, there's probably less of it because it's not just a means to an end. You're learning for the sake of learning because you're interested in the world around you and you're a curious person, and it's not just a box that you're checking. So that was our experience too. One thing I asked my husband and my kids before I came out here, what do you guys think are the benefits of homeschool? My husband said for him, it was that he feels like he really knows his kids well. He said, our kids arrive to us with gifts and interests that need developing, as well as weaknesses that need coaching and shoring up. And nobody is going to care about your kids or find them as fascinating, endlessly fascinating. We all find our kids endlessly fascinating. And so our kids had time to develop what they were to chase what they were interested in. You can put the first grade history curriculum on pause, like we did when my son heard about John Paul Jones, who said, "I have not yet begun to fight." When the British captain said, "Are you Captain Jones? Will you surrender?" "I have not yet begun to fight." And that was Jack was obsessed with John Paul Jones. We went to the library and got books about John Paul Jones, and we were able to pursue learning for the sake of that. We also had time to learn to be a team, I think. You learn a lot of life skills, which again, you can do this if your kid is in school, but you have to be really intentional about it. My kids can all make a charcuterie board, clean a toilet, change a baby's diaper. They can run a campaign. They can do a lot of things because they've done it on the job. They also have learned to be tender with little children, my big kids. And I think I hear a lot of people say, "Well, my kids hate each other. They could never get along." And I'm like, well, that's something they have to learn to do if you homeschool. And guess what? People say, I'm not patient enough. I am not naturally patient at all. That is not my flesh. But you have to learn. You grow in character, and so do your kids. So one of the things my son said too is, Mom, we had bad influences, at various places we'd go, peer influences, but home was kind of a tight web of it was a safe place to land, and it kind of absorbed the shock of some bad stuff out there. It was a safe, good. It was more. Our home culture was more powerful than the culture out there, and I think the more time you have with your kids, the better. So yeah, what about you? What would you say?
and that totally makes sense. Yeah, and one of the things I appreciate about homeschooling, again, I'm really blessed to live in an area that has a lot of homeschoolers, and most of my kids' friends were other homeschoolers. I really appreciated the fact of I knew the kids that my kids were friends with, but I also knew their parents and their families, and that was important. I think sometimes people also become concerned with, well, if I homeschool though, my child is going to miss out on certain things, like what about prom? What about high school graduation? I'm looking at a lady out here, Marie Kennedy, who started the homeschool proms in my area.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, you can still have those things. You don't have
all
to
my
miss
kids
out
have
on
gone
those
to prom,
things.
many
Theater,
proms.
yeah.
Homeschool proms.
All my kids have all done theater because they've done community theaters. So yeah, you won't be in your high school theater production, but you'll be in a community theater production. You'll still get those opportunities. Same thing with sports. So many private schools will allow homeschoolers to play on their sports teams, or there's travel leagues that you can play on. I had a son that did travel soccer all through middle school and high school. So yeah,
It's a great time to homeschool.
yeah, it is. It is a fantastic time to homeschool, which, when I look back in the sort of when homeschooling started to pick up steam, first starts out a little bit in the 1970s, then the 1980s. I look at those pioneers, I feel like we're standing on their shoulders. They really...
Like my mom, I was a homeschool kid, actually.
Oh yeah, we forgot to mention that. Yeah, you can really speak to it from a different angle.
I homeschooled first 4 years, and then private school the middle 4, and public high school. So I had 4 years of each. And I knew that I wanted to homeschool my kids.
It's really nice, I think also, when I look back over our homeschool years, I felt like my kids were able to stay kids. They weren't forced to grow up too fast. They could still play all the fun kid games without somebody telling them, well, that's not cool to do that anymore. And, naturally they'll age out of things, but it was a natural aging out instead of an imposed one from peers telling them that.
Definitely.
I can't believe you're still playing with American Girl dolls or whatever it happens to be, So yeah, that was another nice benefit.
I love the quote, "Education isn't the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire." And I think our kids are not just, you can't just unscrew their head and dump a bunch of facts in. They are souls to be nurtured, but if you capture their imagination in a homeschool experience, and again, if you can't homeschool, there are ways to do this, to try to do this, in whatever situation you are. But you're really shaping a soul, you're shaping something that will last forever, an eternal soul, and people are gonna live out of what they love. Every single person in this National Mall is living out of what they love. We do what we want, and so at some point you're not going to control your kids. You are raising them up to be a wholehearted person that loves that which is worthy of love. Like C.S. Lewis said, the purpose of education is to teach a child to love that which he ought and hate that which he ought. If something is not worthy of love, we don't want our kids chasing it. So you're really, I think, mentoring and discipling. We need to wrap it up. I was gonna just charge every person here, parent, grandparent, that ultimately our nation's wealth is our children, and our family's wealth is also our children. So even more than financial wealth, our national GDP, our national prosperity, our greatest resource is these tiny little pipsqueaks running around here, being loud and messy and messing up our plans. And I think when we invest in our kids' hearts and minds and souls, that is something that will not be taken away, even if your grocery prices are skyrocketing and wars are raging and your stocks are plummeting. You know what's not going to plummet? How much your little kids look up to you and adore you, and how much they are listening to you right now. So I would just say, whether you are able to homeschool or even have an interest in home education, invest in your children, invest in their hearts, their minds, their souls. That is the best way to love your country, is to love your kids.
I can't say that better. That's a perfect note to end on.
Well, thank you very much.